Right, we're back, and I've loaded up the airbrush now with XF16 flat aluminium, and you'll see that I've used some 18mm Tamiya tape just to give us a demarcation line, and we're spraying probably about 85 degrees towards the tape, so the overspray is going up the rear of the fuselage, and we just want to keep it in close. Get that in there and draw back and work our way up. Gently come back over. There we go. Now you can continue spraying up the fuselage. Paint the interior wheel well detail. The main thing is just to get that demarcation line done. Same again here. 85 degree, use the tape as your guide. This side obviously we have the bulkhead to paint. So you want to get all of that and then very carefully paint the rear of it. If need be, you can use your thumb as a bit of a blanking shield just to spray the back so you don't spray the rest of the cockpit. Silver paint, as anyone who paints often knows, it goes everywhere. There we go. So paint the rear fuselage, interior of the rear wheel. There we go. Whilst we're at it, I'll paint the interior of the radiator cowling, because I think that is supposed to be flat silver, and we'll also paint the wheel hubs. Just do that off camera because it'll be quicker and easier. So there's the wheel hubs painted and the interior of the radiator painted, and that just saves a bit of time for later on in the build. There's maybe one or two other little bits that need to be painted silver, but we can pick them up after. Right, I'll get this cleaned up and then we'll get the mask off, and then we can think about doing some detail painting. So back shortly. Okay, so the airbrush is cleaned out and we're good to go. So if we just take off the mask, we've got a nice dividing line there between the silver and the cockpit green, and same on this side. Cracking dividing line between the two parts of the cockpit, and we're moving on nicely. So what I need to do next is we need to get hull red for the seat. We need to get grey and matte black to paint tanks and instrument panel parts. So I'll get the paints ready, we'll get some brushes and a bit of thinner, and we'll get ready to put down some more colour. So back in a moment. Right, we're back. Now for brush painting, I am going to be using Revell Aqua Colour. Now it is Revell's own brand acrylic paints, and I have to say for brush painting they are actually really good. They will thin either with water or they thin quite happily with Tamiya X20A, and they go down very well. They've got very good pigment count and they do the job nicely. So first off, we are painting the seat. Obviously I've painted, one thing that they do being acrylics is they dry very quickly, so you do need to thin them. I just use Tamiya X28, but you have to be wary, obviously, if you thin them that they flow nicely. You may need to do 2 coats. Get that in frame. what they do is they dry down very, very well. So if there is any brush strokes in them, as long as you've got a decent amount of thinner, they will dry to a very flat and matte finish. Now I know this is rust colour, however when we put a wash over this, it'll dull it down a little bit, and if I use either a sepia wash or maybe Citadel acrylic, so something like a flesh shade wash, then it'll dull it down, but it'll also give it a little bit more of a red hue, which will be in keeping with the red Formica that these seats were made from. Obviously the fuse holder, the flare holder, I keep calling it a fuse holder, but the flare holder on the front of the seat remains interior green. It is just the seat itself that is the Formica colour. As you can see, this paint I've thinned it quite heavily, so I'm going to need 2 coats, but it will only need 2 coats, and it will dry off reasonably quickly. So I'm trying to be quite precise with my application. There we go. Now this piece here is, in the Edard instructions, is calling out to be black. Little leather pad, and obviously the seat is well hollowed out because the pilots sat on their parachutes as a cushion. So we need to paint the rim of the seat. We'll need to paint the underside, not that anyone's going to see it, but we know it's there, so we may as well do it. And I have to say, because this is 1/35th scale, it's a hell of a lot easier to paint because the parts are a little bit bigger. So anyone with old eyes like me, then you'll be reveling in the fact that you can actually see what you're doing. So inside of the seat, working into the corners, nice steady smooth brush strokes. We don't need to do the whole of this backrest. And I am sure that as much as they want you to do black leather, we probably could do brown. So I'm sure leather is leather in the war, and they would just use whatever they could get their hands on. Might be wrong, but a little bit of research will answer that question. Right, need to be careful here along the front, painting the rim. So just support your hands as best you can. Let the tip of the brush do the work for you. Draw it along the edge. There we go. Base of the seat. There is an ejector pin mark there right at the bottom. I'll just have to live with it. Now, these paints react really well to hair dryers if you want to get them to dry off a bit quicker. I'm happy just to leave it for the 5 and 10 minutes that it would take to do. Right, here's the first coat on. We'll need to come in and touch up because I've managed to paint over the adjusting lever. Right, let me clean the brush off and we'll come back in with some of the black detail. Right, we're back. Clean the brush off and we're on to the flat black now. So, as we said before, the cushion in the back is flat black. And this Revell flat black covers very well. I'm rushing this a little bit. Normally I would let the paints fully dry between coats. Right. Headrest, flat black as well. This is where you need to just let the bristles of the brush line them up and let them work their way around. Try and be as precise as you can to avoid having to come in and do lots of touch-ups. So we've got a little bit to touch up here, but that's not too bad. I'm actually just going to paint this rim black, I think. I think that leather would have curved over the back. Right, so not sure about the colour of that is. Doesn't really call out for it, and I don't see a similar one on the Edard instructions, so we'll just leave it as it is. Right, side panels. So I may as well dive in with the most difficult one first. And the first bit is, get your camera in that you can see, is we need to do the instrument panel itself. Now there's a nice little drop of thinners in there, it's starting to thicken up pretty quick. Doesn't need much, a couple of drops will thin it down enough. A good stir. Clean the excess off the brush, we only need what we need. Right, so there is a really nice step where the instrument panel is, so we can use that as an aid to get a nice straight edge for the black paint. Because we've tried to be careful and avoided putting too much green on the instrument panel, the black paint's covering very, very efficiently. Now what we can do, just to highlight the bezels and such like on this panel, is we can come back in once the black is fully dried, and I really do mean fully dried. We can come back in and we can dry brush with a medium grey or a dark sea grey colour, just to catch the bezels and lift them out the instrument panel to stand out more and be more visual when you're looking into the cockpit. Right, so there's the instrument panel painted, very, very quick. We've got the reflector sight and its mounting. Get that painted up. all parts of it. Right, sidewall detail. Let's have a look where we're at. So we've got okay, these instructions aren't exactly the same for the parts count, but we do have this part here. So this is black. And you can see just how well the Revell black covers. And with a good pointed brush, we've got plenty of control. So we're getting the paint exactly where we want it. Again, that'll minimize touch-ups. Like I said before, the Revell paint thins beautifully and is a pleasure to use. Right. Now, there isn't much help as to what's what here. I'm thinking the compass will probably be black, if I can find it on the Edard instructions. Grey, green, flat black. Okay, so the round of the compass is black and the frame holding it is interior green. So we can gently come in here, paint the top and the front lip. There we go, that's the compass painted. Right, what next? Green. That's flat black, so they're saying this tank here is flat black. What we can do is leave the strap, retaining strap, as silver. That gives a little bit of contrast, add a bit of interest. Obviously, when you're looking down from the top, we want to make sure we get the paint as far back around the part as we can. So when you're viewing in, it looks like the part is wholly painted. There we go. Right. We've got this part here, which isn't on the instructions, but it looks like it's an add-on, and I think I'm going to paint it black. I'll chance it. And there is another part here, which I think is something to do with the fuel selector. Again, I think that will be black too. And a little bit of dry brushing on all these parts will make the details absolutely pop on them. Right, so there we go, there's the start of the cockpit. This side, let's get to the instructions. The references for this side are a bit better on the Edard instructions. These tanks are grey, this parts here are matte black, so these levers are matte black. I believe this radio set is matte black as well as this one here. So start with the wheel. I'm assuming this is a trim wheel. Very good. We've got this radio set here. Right, this set here and then we've got these levers here. This centerpiece is black. This lever is black, and this lever is black. And that's the throttle controls, I think, possibly. Right, anything else for anything else? Most everything else is green. Oh, this panel here is flat black. So this is black here. And I think this panel, I'm not sure, it's just these strips in here. And this one here. They're black for some reason. I think that's the last of it. Yeah. Right. So that's the black done. Next colour is grey. So I'll just clear the brush. And all I tend to do here is get a bit of X20A on the bench, make a pool, get the brush in there, make sure you work it right into the base of the brush, and then clean it off. Right, grey has been thinned, shaken well and thinned. So I'm going to paint these tanks. We'll leave the pipe at the top that joins them silver. Just want to get the tanks painted, and the retaining strap as well will make that silver too. So we just want to get this grey paint is a really, if I can keep the holder apart, the grey paint is a really nice paint. It's got very, very good coverage. It's really what we want off a paint. And I really do like working with the Revell paints, because they work very, very well for brush painting. And when they dry, they're very, very hard wearing as well. If you thin them enough, you can spray with them, but beware, you have to thin them an awful lot, because they are very pigment rich and in their normal form, they're far too thick to go through any airbrush. Even a 0.5mm needle, you'd struggle to get them through without heavily thinning them. There we go. So the oxygen tank's painted now. What we can do, whilst we've still got the grey on the brush, so we can do a little bit of get the paint off. Go back to the first one we did, and then do a little bit of dry brushing, so long as the black paint is fully cured. Don't come in dry brushing too soon, otherwise you'll just end up with a what they call a wet blend. But hopefully I can start seeing the black paint getting polished up with the grey. You don't need it to be too stark, but just enough that gives the panel a bit of interest. Side panel. I'm going to come down mainly from the top because that will be where the normal sunlight's coming in. And that will catch all those top edges and help to give you that top highlight. Works very well on a hard edge. There we go. Hopefully you can see that. Hopefully that's coming out in the film. It's all nicely highlighted. Quick rip over to this side, and that shows you how quick the Revell paints dry, that we can come back in so quickly and give them a dry brush. What we want to do is just catch all those crisped edge details, just to highlight them, give the eye something to look at. There we go, you can see that those parts are starting to come to life now. And we can put a wash over this, and that'll help obviously add a bit of shadow back in and help accentuate the parts that we've just dry brushed. So there we go. We'll clean the brush off, and then we'll come back and check this seat over. Actually, we can do a little bit of dry brushing on that too. Right, can have a check. So just come back in when you come for the second coat. Again, it doesn't need to be super thick, because all it's designed to do is just to cover over any of the previous paintwork that was showing a little bit thin. Anybody that watches Duncan Rhodes Painting Academy, Duncan's a well-known Warhammer painter. His motto is 2 thin coats, and he's fairly right. 2 thin coats will see you okay. And if you've got a thin coat, it really does go a long way to avoiding brush strokes and paint that looks kind of caked on. The one thing to remember when you are using Revell aquacolor paints is that if you put them on too thick and then don't give them enough time to dry, you get the eggshell effect where the exterior of the paint dries, but the interior of the paint is still wet. You can get cracking as it does dry, and you can get shrinkage on the paint, which leads to a very poor paint finish and will cause you no end of headaches. So that's why I'm happy. You can see in here, didn't get quite the best coverage first time round. So I'm happy just to come in with a thin coat, lay it down, in all the necessary areas. Hopefully you can see all this painting. Yep. So lay it down. And when it's dry, we'll come back in and we'll wash the whole, put a wash over the whole airframe and cockpit parts. So that second thin coat's going on very nicely. A little bit scruffy under the bottom here where the leather is. There we go. Right, we'll let that dry a moment. I'll touch up the black and the green, and then we can think about washing this and bringing it really to life. So, back shortly.